Welcome to Contact Has Begun, brought to you by the grace of the World Puja Network, one of the last vestiges of truth concerning benevolent, spiritually, and technologically advanced off-world visitors. Some refer to these visitors as our greater family of man or returning ancient ancestors. I am James Dolan, your host, and our guests also include cutting-edge physicists, authors, teachers, and healers dedicated to the awakening and healing of humanity and the earth. Let the journey begin. Greetings, this is James Gillen with World Puja. We've got a great show today. We've got Bryce, is it Zable, I guess?
No,
or
it's Zabel.
Zable, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we've got the co-author of AD, After Disclosure, with Richard Dolan, who we just had on our show. And he's created 5 primetime network series, notably NBC's Dark Skies, released on DVD in 2011. He also wrote and produced Syfy's first original film, Official Denial, about Majestic 12. He also worked on the development team on a Spielberg production called miniseries called Taken in 2008. I guess you've got the Writers Guild Award. You've got all kinds of things for your work. I can go on and on with all this stuff.
Let's not.
But, yeah, I really want to get into the interview, and
sure.
I've got so many different questions I know the listeners would love to know about, the Dark Skies and all this. How did you come across this information, and also, too, is what moved you in the direction of bringing this information out?
Everyone who has investigated or thought about the entire topic of UFOs has a different story to tell. There's a different journey for everyone. But for most people, it starts with not thinking about it too much, and then something catches your attention, and you pay a little more attention. And then I think the typical person kind of recoils, at least intellectually recoils, and says, wait, hold it, if this can't be true, because if it was true, then everybody would know about it. But since nobody really knows about it, it can't be true. And I think I went through that phase as a kid, and then didn't think too much about it. I had read The Interrupted Journey as a kid and really enjoyed it. But I started I started in the news business as a reporter, but then I went into the screenwriting business here in Hollywood, and in the late 80s, I started working on a spec script about alien abductions that and later got me a job at LA Law and also got made into that Syfy Channel movie you're talking about, Official Denial. Mm-hmm. But in terms of trying to do the movie and to do it as accurately as possible, I started reading widely in the area. And I there's a lot of crazy stuff, but there's also a lot of truth out there. And I started focusing on just trying to tell myself this story. Was what I was doing for the Syfy Channel all made up, or was it based on truth? And I came to the conclusion that it was based on truth, and it became kind of a lifetime obsession to continue to read and talk and learn about the topic. And I guess I've crossed over to where it's clear to me that there is a UFO and ET reality that we have to acknowledge, and certainly Richard Dolan and I in our new book basically say there's no reason trying to prove it anymore. It's already proved. The question is, what are we going to do about it? How's it going to change society after we acknowledge this publicly? So I guess that's my journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had talking with Richard about that. I said, it's gone beyond the need for proof. I mean, the proof is out there for anybody with a reasonable mind. But we do have those with an unreasonable mind and disinformation, and some religious factions out there that refuse to realize the universe is much bigger than what's in their little book. But it's amazing how all this information is coming out now, and it seems like it's in the subconscious, the psyche of everyone, and it's also coming from real-life experiences where people have had encounters and had contact, and I guess this is a compilation of a lot of that information that you've dug into, as well as government files, which most people don't even know about.
Well, we do have to state that for years, literally since Donald Kehoe was involved in the 50s, people have been predicting that disclosure was imminent. So you do have to take the long view, the historical approach to this, and say there's always going to be somebody telling you that it's imminent. So we had to separate ourselves from that issue and try to say what's different about today, and are conditions actually different than they were then? And we think that they specifically are in a number of areas. And so while we would not get a crystal ball or a calendar out and say it's going to happen here at this time, we do think that the issue of disclosure, which for years and years has seemed impossible. I mean, actually, if it was possible, then why would we be 6 decades plus into this and still not have disclosure? So it's felt impossible, but we believe that there are certain trend lines out there that make that impossible start to turn into the inevitable. And whether it happens next year, or it happens in 5 years, or it happens in 10 years, it's eventually going to happen, because it must. The truth eventually will out, and that's kind of what we based our book on.
Yeah, it definitely seems like I've always said that the real disclosure is going to come from the skies, and it'll come within the next probably year and a half, without a doubt. I have no doubt about it. But it seems to already be happening with UFOs appearing all around the world over major countries and cities, and people filming that. And
we should do your show again, by the way, James, in a year and a half, because now you've gone and done it. You've put a calendar on it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have no problem with this one. Before I've always said not yet, but I know I have certain information that I know it's definitely going to happen.
All right, well.
But it's the way I see it is that disclosure really has already happened. If you look at some of the older Time CNN polls that are fudged now, they're greatly fudged. But the older ones were saying 80+% of the people believe that UFOs exist.
Well, let's though, for the sake of argument, put a definition on disclosure, and let's define it not as whether the public in numerical superiority believes that there's truth to UFO and ET reality, but let's define disclosure as a public acknowledgement within the institutions of the public that it's real. In that regard, you could say disclosure has not happened. I do think, though, that you're correct. At some point, and this is what Richard and I believe, that at some point the very abilities that we have technologically and just how the planet is wired up and how we're all in communication with each other, that trend line is taking us on a path where if the others, which is what we call the visitors, the other presence, if the others do not disclose themselves to us, and if the powers that be who are speaking for humanity do not disclose the others to us, we will have to do it for ourselves. And we increasingly have the ability to perceive where we are in the universe, and I think with every day our perceptual abilities, aided by our technology, of course, make it clearer and clearer what's around us. And you could only imagine, 100 years ago there were still a lot of horses ferrying people about. So we've changed so much in the last 100 years. Do you really think that in 20 years or 50 years, for example, that we can be visited by an alternate intelligence to our own and not be aware of them? I think that's highly unlikely. So we will force that public disclosure if it doesn't come on its own accord.
Oh, yeah. Well, it seems like through the mainstream, we're getting incredible press up here, and I haven't even tried to get it, but we actually had Hannity send a crew up here, and they did a report, and it was pretty positive. It was amazing because they came here, and I think they were just trying to make in the beginning they thought they'd kind of make a spoof out of it, and debunk it, but the problem is that the ships did come. They did appear. They got them on film. They missed the really big ones because they were in shock when they came in. So their cameraman actually missed them, but I got them. I got them on film. But and I shared that with them. And they always sanitize it. It seems like no matter who comes up here from the mainstream, you give them just evidence that's just extremely hard to deny. And they don't show that part, but they'll show the more vague stuff.
Well,
and sanitize it.
Richard and I are pretty hard on the media in our book. It's a mixed bag, and I have to say, in full disclosure for myself, I was a former CNN correspondent, and I was also an investigative reporter for PBS. So I've done my share of working on the other side of the aisle, if you will. But what I see is just a complete missing of the story by the establishment media. Occasionally, you'll see establishment voices weigh in on UFOs, but quite often, in fact, most often, they have bought into the whole official denial and public ridicule policy that's been in place since the 50s. And, people ask me whether the media is being manipulated. I say personally right now, in my view, the media has manipulated itself. If you want to understand how the media works, think about high school. Everybody wanted to be the cool kid, and nobody wanted to be laughed at. All right, well, the media, they want to be the cool kids. All right, they want everyone to like them. And the last thing they want to do is anything that would cause anyone to laugh at them. So it's so much easier to take a skeptical view than it is to roll up your sleeves and investigate. It's partly because of the high school metaphor, but there's another something at work here, which is simply that the reason that we have a lot more views today than we do news is money. It is much more expensive to dig into a story than it is to offer an opinion about a story. So you can, you talk about Hannity sending a crew up. Well, actually, that's great. That show paid for a crew to come up. Well, good for them, because that's rare. Usually, it would be easier to grab some video from someplace else and then make fun of it. The most recent example that just turns my stomach is how the Air Force officers who spoke at the National Press Club were treated. They were completely, here they are saying that UFOs have been near nuclear missile installations and interfered with nuclear missile performance. And these are people that we trust to watch nuclear missiles and fire them if we need them to be fired on behalf of our country. Well, how do we treat that news? First, the establishment media completely ignores it. They don't even cover it. And those that do talk about it, CNN did some talking about it after running a little bit of it live, they made fun of it. And the Washington Post, that pillar of journalistic integrity supposedly built on the edifice of Woodward and Bernstein, how did they cover the UFO conference? They sent a lifestyle reporter to the National Press Club who arrived late and began and ended his coverage of that news conference with a description of the cookies that were being served at the press club. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of getting the media up to speed on this, and Richard and I believe that post-disclosure, the media will be not in a good way, that people will have seen them for being the failures that they have been so far.
Oh, I agree. Robert Salas was just here at the ranch not too long ago, and he got to have his own personal sighting of several objects that he couldn't identify, and one was a brilliant green light, just a massive green light moving all over the mountain here. And, it's amazing. I had him on the show as well. There's a lot more to that story, which I don't really have his permission to reveal. I'll let him do that. But as you said, they just do a small little blurb on it, and they really don't even cover what really did happen there. Okay, they did fly over, they did shut down the missiles, but was there any contact there? Was there any message? Was there more to this story? They never really dig into this, like you're saying. They just have somebody saying an opinion, and then it's dismissed.
And it's actually worse than that if you think about it.
Oh yeah,
the UFOs being commingled with nuclear missiles. Yeah. If that is not a national security issue, I do not know what is. Okay, so if I'm the Washington Post, and these guys are going to go down to the National Press Club, I should say to them, and I'm an editor, I'm going to say, well, they could be lying, in which case that's a story, or they could be delusional, like post-traumatic stress disorder, in which case that's a story, or they could be telling the truth, in which case that's a real story. So we're going to send our top national security reporter down there to get to the bottom of it, and we're going to cut that person loose for a couple weeks or a month to try to figure out what the truth is here. Do they do that? No, they send the cookie patrol. So, that's just what we're up against. And